He hadn't planned on becoming the kind of man who carried someone else's burdens home in silence. But that night, as the office lights dimmed one by one and the city outside hummed with its usual indifference, Oliver Hartley found himself doing exactly that. It started with a call no one else wanted to answer. The company's annual dinner had stretched longer than expected, filled with polite laughter, clinking glasses, and conversations that felt rehearsed. Oliver had stayed near the edges of the room, as he always did, quietly observing, offering a kind word here and there, and making sure nothing went wrong. He wasn't the loudest voice in the office, nor the most ambitious, but he was dependable. People trusted him without needing to say it out loud. His boss, Eleanor Whitcomb, had been the center of attention all evening. Confident, composed, and admired, she carried herself with the kind of grace that made people believe she had everything under control. She had built the company from a small consultancy into something meaningful, and most employees, including Oliver, respected her deeply. But as the night wore on, something shifted. Oliver noticed it first in the way her laughter lingered just a second too long, in the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. Then came the extra glass of wine. And another. By the time the dinner ended, most people had said their goodbyes and slipped away into the night, unaware, or perhaps unwilling to notice, that Eleanor Whitcomb was no longer steady on her feet. Oliver had been gathering his things when the restaurant manager approached him, concern etched across his face. "Excuse me, sir," he said gently. "I believe Ms. Whitcomb may need assistance." Oliver followed him to a quiet corner near the exit. There she was, sitting alone, her posture slumped, her usually immaculate composure undone. Her heels rested awkwardly beside her chair, and her eyes, those sharp, intelligent eyes everyone admired, looked distant and tired. For a moment, Oliver hesitated. He had never seen her like this. Not once in the 3 years he had worked under her leadership. "Ms. Whitcomb," he said softly. She looked up at him, blinking as if trying to bring the world back into focus. "Oliver," she murmured. "Everyone's gone." "Yes," he replied gently. "The evening's over." She let out a quiet, uneven breath. "I suppose I stayed too long." There was something fragile in her voice that made his chest tighten. "Let me get you home," he said. She didn't argue. The journey was quiet. Oliver helped her into the back seat of a taxi, carefully placing her heels beside her and making sure she was comfortable. He gave the driver her address, he had seen it once on a company document, and sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. For most of the ride, Eleanor didn't speak. She leaned her head lightly against the window, her eyes half closed, as the city lights passed by in soft, blurred streaks. Oliver kept his gaze forward, not wanting to intrude on her privacy, but he remained attentive, ready to help if needed. At one point, she shifted slightly and whispered, almost to herself, "It's strange, isn't it?" Oliver glanced at her. "What is?" "How quiet everything becomes," she said. "After you spend so long making noise." He didn't know how to respond to that, so he simply listened. When the taxi finally pulled up outside her home, a modest but elegant townhouse on a quiet street, Oliver paid the driver and stepped out first. He opened the door and offered her his hand. She accepted it without hesitation. Inside, the house was neat but carried a stillness that felt heavier than silence. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind that lingered, as if it had been there for a long time. Oliver guided her to the sofa. "Do you have water?" he asked. She gestured vaguely toward the kitchen. "Somewhere." He found a glass, filled it, and brought it back to her. She took a few slow sips, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You don't need to thank me," he replied. He stood there for a moment, unsure whether to leave or stay. It didn't feel right to simply walk out, not when she was clearly not herself. "Would you like me to call someone?" he asked. "A friend? A relative?" She shook her head almost immediately. No. The answer was firm, but not cold, more like it came from a place of deep weariness. I'll be fine, she added after a moment. Oliver studied her expression. He didn't fully believe it, but he respected her dignity. All right, he said. I'll just make sure you're settled. He helped her to her room, making sure she was comfortable, placing a glass of water on the bedside table, and gently reminding her to rest. She murmured something he couldn't quite catch, something soft and almost grateful. Then, without expecting anything in return, Oliver left. He didn't mention it to anyone. The next morning, he woke up as he always did, early, with the quiet determination to face the day. He made his tea, reviewed his notes for work, and tried not to think too much about the previous night. It wasn't his place to talk about it. To him, it had simply been an act of kindness. Something anyone should do. But as he was about to leave for the office, there was a knock on his door. It was gentle, but insistent. Oliver frowned slightly. He wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened the door, he froze. Eleanor Whitcomb stood there. She looked different. Not just because she was sober now, or because her hair was neatly tied back again, or because she wore her usual composed attire. It was something deeper than that. Something in her eyes. They were filled with tears. Ms. Whitcomb? Oliver said, surprised. May I come in? She asked softly. He stepped aside immediately. Of course. She entered slowly, as if unsure of her footing, not physically this time, but emotionally. Oliver closed the door behind her and gestured toward a chair. Please, he said. She sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, without warning, a tear slipped down her cheek. I owe you an apology, she said. Oliver shook his head gently. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do, she insisted, her voice trembling. You saw me, not as I should be seen. Oliver met her gaze calmly. I saw someone who needed help. Her expression softened, but the tears continued. That's not how I'm used to being seen, she admitted. I've spent years making sure of that. He didn't interrupt. I've built my life on being strong, she continued. On being the one who has all the answers. The one who never falters. She let out a quiet, shaky breath. But last night, I couldn't hold it together anymore. Oliver leaned slightly forward, his voice gentle. Everyone has moments like that. She shook her head faintly. Not me. Not until now. There was a long pause. Then she said something that changed everything. My husband passed away 6 months ago. Oliver felt a quiet heaviness settle in the room. I didn't tell anyone at work, she went on. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want people to look at me differently. Her voice cracked slightly. So I carried on. I smiled. I worked. I pretended. Another tear fell. But last night, it caught up with me. Oliver didn't try to fix it. He didn't offer empty reassurances. He simply listened, his presence steady and kind. I was embarrassed, she admitted. Ashamed, even. Not because I drank too much, but because I let someone see me when I wasn't strong. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his. But you didn't judge me. He shook his head. There was nothing to judge. You didn't tell anyone? She asked. Of course not. She let out a breath that seemed to carry weeks of tension with it. I came here this morning because I couldn't stop thinking about it, she said. About how you handled everything. You didn't make it a spectacle. You didn't treat me like I was broken. You just helped. Oliver offered a small, reassuring smile. That's what people should do for each other. She nodded slowly. I think I forgot that, she said. Silence settled between them again, but this time it felt different. Lighter. Warmer. I've spent so long believing that strength means never needing anyone, she continued. But maybe, it's the opposite. Oliver considered her words. Maybe strength is knowing when to let someone help, he said quietly. She looked at him, and for the first time since she arrived, a faint, genuine smile appeared. I think you're right. They talked for a while longer, not about work, not about responsibilities, but about life. About loss, resilience, and the quiet ways people can show up for each other. When she finally stood to leave, she seemed lighter. Thank you, Oliver, she said. He nodded. Anytime. As she reached the door, she paused. You know, she said, turning back to him, you've changed something for me. He raised an eyebrow slightly. I don't feel like I have to carry everything alone anymore. Oliver smiled. Good, he said. You don't. She left with a sense of calm that hadn't been there when she arrived. And Oliver, standing in the quiet of his home, realized something too. Sometimes, the most powerful thing a person can do isn't to solve problems or offer grand gestures. It's simply to be there, to listen, to care, and to act with kindness when no one else is watching. Because in a world that often celebrates strength as independence, the truth is far more human. We are not meant to carry everything alone. And sometimes, the smallest acts of compassion can become the turning point in someone's story. From that day on, things at the office changed, not dramatically, not in ways that drew attention, but in subtle, meaningful ways. Eleanor Whitcomb was still strong, still capable, still the leader everyone respected. But she was also more open, more present. She listened more. She connected more. And Oliver? He remained the same. Quiet. Kind. Steady. But now, his quiet kindness had a ripple effect. Because one night, without expecting anything in return, he chose to help someone in silence. And the next morning, that silence turned into something powerful, understanding, healing, and hope. And that, perhaps, is where true strength begins.